Some time ago, we took a deep dive into the various worlds that had shaped the history and character of the Jedi Order, from the once lush world of Ossus to the Ecumenopolis of Coruscant. In today's video, we'll be doing much the same, but for the Sith Empire, looking at the most influential worlds in its culture and history. As we'll discover, if it hadn't been for some of these worlds, the Sith as we know them today would have never existed. Others still were the sole reason the Sith managed to cling to existence after yet another devastating war with the Republic.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Before we go on, however, we do have to clarify what we're identifying as a Sith world. During its many incarnations, the Sith Empire conquered thousands of worlds, many of which became central to its history. But throughout the millennia, one region of space was central to almost every Sith state, a region of the Estran sector enclosed by the Stygian caldera. This large nebulosity kept the planets within fairly separated from the rest of the galaxy for thousands of years, and the first Sith Empire was almost entirely contained within its borders, where it developed in isolation. There were at least 120 planets within the caldera, 19 of which have been named. However, we won't be looking at all 19. Many of these are minor planets with little significance. Instead, we'll be focusing on the heavy hitters, the planets with the most significance both historically and culturally. With that out of the way, let's get right into it. The first planet we'll be looking at today is none other than Korriban, perhaps the most important planet in all of Sith history and the birthplace of the Sith Order. Known also by the names of Pesigam and Moraband, Korriban was a small planet in the Horuset system. It was overall a very dry and cold planet with sweeping vistas of red sand and tall mountain ranges that created deep canyons and valleys. Several trade routes converged on the planet, primarily the Kamet Krot and the Nash Belfia. The planet's fauna was shaped by this harsh environment as much as it was by the strong dark side locus. The creatures that evolved and thrived on the planet were particularly vicious and cunning, much like on other dark side worlds. There were the Chiroptera and Shirax, which lived in flocks in the many caves of the world, and the Tukata, known as Sith Hounds, which inhabited the planet's many valleys. Raids, large reptilian creatures common on desert worlds, made the vast red dunes their homes, and highly venomous pelco bugs lived in the rocky crags. Alongside Korriban's native flora, there were many others that had been introduced from off-world, such as the Terentatek, the Hissis, and the Kolor slugs. These creatures soon became a familiar sight, as many of them, like the Kolor slugs, made their home in many tombs of ancient Sith. But Korriban wasn't famous for its ecotourism. The planet was renowned for being the homeworld of the Sith species, whose religion and culture would go on to be the foundation of the Sith Empire. Very little is known about Korriban's most ancient history. We know that the Sith evolved on the world and that they began erecting tombs in the Valley of Golg around 200,000 BBY. The most modern stage of Sith civilization began 100,000 years later, and 70,000 years after that, records mention a Killik incursion. Around 27,700 BBY, the Infinite Empire found the world, invading and seeking to take Sith as slaves. The Sith were eventually able to repel this invasion, but it came at a steep cost. Korriban, which had previously been a more habitable planet, was laid waste by the conflict, and following the Rakata's departure, what remained of Sith society was forced to relocate to other planets in the caldera, most notably Ziost, which became their new homeworld. For thousands of years, the Sith were left to their own devices. In 6,900 BBY, however, that all changed when Offworlders came to Korriban for the first time in almost 20,000 years. These outsiders were Dark Jedi, the last of the schismatics that had been exiled from the Jedi Order at the end of the 100-Year Darkness. Thanks to their abilities with the Force, the Dark Jedi impressed the Sith and established themselves as godlike figures in their society. Under their rule, they combined their beliefs and Force teachings with those of the Sith people, blending them in what would come to be known as Sith ideology. For nearly 2,000 years, society on Korriban flourished. Many Dark Lords rose and fell, with monuments erected in their glory. The Sith Empire grew in strength, building fleets and armies under the command of the Dark Lord of the Sith. Meanwhile, the galaxy past the nebula had changed. The Infinite Empire had fallen many millennia ago, and in its place had risen the Galactic Republic. The Jedi Order had thrived and was now working alongside the Republic to maintain law and order in the galaxy. The The two worlds were completely separated until, one day, the Daragon twins pioneered the Daragon Trail and found themselves alighting upon the red sands of Korriban. This, of course, was the trigger event for the Great Hyperspace War, during which the Sith Empire, led by Naga Sadow, invaded the Galactic Republic, engaging it in one of the bloodiest wars history had ever known. The end of the war saw the Sith defeated and Korriban left in ruin. For 1,000 years, it lay abandoned. The turning point came when Exar Kun, guided by the spirit of Frida Nad, traveled there in search of Sith knowledge. For the next 4,000 years, Korriban would once more become relevant to the wars of the Sith. Kun's followers established a Sith Academy on the planet, which continued its work long after Kun's death and the end of the Old Sith Wars. During the Mandalorian Wars, Revan infiltrated the planet in search of the star map hidden within Naga Sadow's tomb. At the end of the Jedi Civil War, the Sith Civil War broke out on Korriban, and the Sith nearly wiped themselves out, laying waste to the Academy and the sole settlement on the planet, Dreshte Spaceport. When the Republic arrived to clear out any remaining Sith, they found it abandoned, its surface littered with corpses and its tombs plundered. For the next 300 years, the Republic force remained there, guarding the old Sith world, until Sith forces once again attacked. These were the true Sith, a branch of Sith that had broken off during the Great Hyperspace War and traveled into the unknown regions. Led by Darth Vitiate, they emerged from hiding and attacked the Republic, triggering the Great Galactic War. One of their first priorities was retaking Korriban, and thus, after staging a distraction, they launched a surprise assault on the Republic outpost, killing many troopers and Jedi before retaking the planet. Retaking Korriban had been a priority for the Sith, as not only was it a symbolic world for their people, but also the location of the most ancient Sith Academy, which immediately reopened. The Great Galactic War saw the Sith expand across half of the known galaxy, claiming victory over the Republic and Jedi with the Treaty of Coruscant. What followed was a period known as the Cold War. However, it lasted little more than 20 years before the Galactic War was reignited. During the end of this new conflict, Korriban was invaded by the Republic in 3637 BBY. This, however, turned out to be a ploy by an organization known as the Revanites. As Korriban was invaded by the Republic and the Academy held hostage, the Sith invaded Tython and took over the Jedi Temple. It took rare cooperation between the Republic and Sith to thwart the Revanites. No sooner had the conflict ended, however, than the Eternal Empire of Zakul invaded the galaxy, running roughshod over both the Republic and Sith Empire and bringing them down to their knees. When the Sith refused to bow to Zakulan authority, Zakul ordered their Eternal Fleet to bombard Korriban until its temples turned to dust. Once more, the planet would be abandoned, at least until the time of the New Sith Wars, when the Brotherhood of Darkness fought hard to reclaim control of the planet so they could build a new Sith Academy. This is where the most promising recruits were sent to train, and the Sith apprentices that emerged from it were famous for being the most skilled in the Brotherhood. After the Ruusan Reformation, you can imagine that Korriban was once again abandoned. Although it saw some minor activity during the Clone Wars and was the location where Darth Krayt later tried to establish his empire, it would never again be the focal point of the Sith as it had been in millennia past. Many other Sith worlds met the same fate. The next planet we'll be looking at is Dromund Kaas, a world which served as the de facto capital of the true Sith Empire during the time the galaxy believed the Sith to be gone forever. Located in the Dromund system, Dromund Kaas was the third planet orbiting its star. Its planetary neighbors were Jaguada and Bostherda, and all three planets lay along the Kamat-Krot hyperspace lane. Much like Korriban had been, Dromund Kaas was a planet deeply steeped in dark side energy. Its biosphere, however, couldn't have been more different from Korriban's. By the time the Sith colonized the world, Dromund Kaas's surface was covered by thick, wild jungles, marshes, and oceans. The skies above were perpetually marked by lightning as the planet's dark side energy constantly created storms above. The jungles themselves were so thick and teeming with vicious predators that it took considerable effort to establish cities on the planet's surface. Native reptilian Jurgaron fought for the title of top predator with imported Gundarks. Maylok, which resembled reptilian flying shrimp, hunted from the skies, while Sleens, Vinecats, and Yozusk prowled the forests. In the marshlands, Swamp Wampa were ready to tear their next meal apart. All in all, it was an inhospitable world, but the Sith claimed it for their own regardless. The Sith first arrived on the planet after they first took to the stars. Although they established a minor colony on the world, its location was lost centuries before Sadow's Great Hyperspace War. It was only years later that the true Sith rediscovered the planet. When Vitiate and his followers broke off from Sadow's forces, they roamed the stars of the caldera for 20 years before eventually rediscovering Dromund Kaas. There, Vitiate declared a reconstituted Sith Empire that would take revenge on the Republic. He declared himself as the Sith Emperor and established the Dark Council, a group of 12 Darths that would be responsible for various elements of the Empire's day-to-day life. Over time, the Sith pushed back the wild jungles to establish Kaas City, the capital of the Empire and the only true city on Dromund Kaas. Many points of interest soon cropped up in and around the city. The Imperial Citadel homed the administrative and legislative powers of the Empire. This was where many Darths had offices, where the Dark Council met, and even where the Sith Emperor ruled from. Nearby were the Ministries of War, Intelligence, and Logistics, as well as the Ministry of Sith Intelligence. Another building of note was the Dark Temple, a gargantuan building housing the tombs of powerful Sith. The temple was the inspiration of one Darth Brontes, the architect behind the madness-inducing halls. For centuries, the true Sith were left in peace to grow stronger in the shadows. Around 3960, however, they were discovered by none other than Jedi Knights Revan and Malak, who had journeyed into the unknown in pursuit of a shadowy enemy they had sensed. As the stories go, the Sith Emperor was able to break their minds, a feat made much easier by how close to the dark side the Mandalorian Wars had brought the two generals. The now Darths were released back into the galaxy, where they returned with an armada of ships to begin the Jedi Civil War. But it wasn't the last time Revan would encounter the Emperor. 4 years later, he would return to Dromund Kaas and attempt to kill him. His plot was, in the end, unsuccessful, and with Revan out of the picture, the true Sith remained undetected until they were ready to strike. 3 centuries later, the true Sith emerged from hiding and waged war on the galaxy and the Galactic Republic. For the most part, Dromund Kaas was left undisturbed. Unlike Korriban and many other Sith worlds, no Republic fleet ever threatened the capital of the Empire. Several conflicts broke out among the Sith themselves, but it wasn't until the Galactic War some 50 years later that a Jedi presence finally found its way to the Sith capital. The hero of Tython led a small strike force to Dromund Kaas in an effort to infiltrate the Sith Emperor's citadel and kill him once and for all. At the time, this operation seemed to be a success. Later, however, the galaxy would come to know that Darth Vitiate was much more than he appeared to be. Following the death of the Emperor, the Dark Council took over leadership of the Sith Empire and continued with its war with the Republic. When the Eternal Empire of Zakul invaded, Dromund Kaas remained the capital, now under the leadership of Sith Empress Asina. Dromund Kaas was bombarded near the end of the War of Liberation, but overall, it escaped most of these wars unscathed. Fast forward 2,500 years to 1004 BBY, when Dromund Kaas was the site of a battle between the Republic and the Brotherhood of Darkness. At this time, the planet was technically under Republic control, and the Brotherhood launched an invading force to try and retake it. However, they failed, and the world was abandoned once more. Dromund Kaas wouldn't really be occupied again until 990 BBY, when Darth Millennial established the Dark Force, a new dark side religion he founded after rejecting the rule of 2. The prophets of the dark side, as his followers became known, would rule the isolated world for millennia until Darth Sidious discovered it in 22 BBY, just after the outbreak of the Clone Wars. He took the planet for himself, deleting it from the Jedi archives to keep it secret. By this point, the planet was one of legends, a tale told among Padawan to frighten one another. Compared to what happened to other famous Sith worlds, this fate is far more preferable. The planet we're referring to is, of course, Ziost, one of the most sacred planets of the ancient Sith. Along with 4 others, Korriban, Relg, Cardelba, and Creyas II, it was one of 5 sacred planets of the original Sith Empire, all connected by the looping hyperlane known as the Nash Belfia. In ancient times, Ziost was a warm world covered with dense forests. The wildlife that had evolved on the world was quite aggressive, like the vine caps and reptavians that preyed on other animals and any sentience that wandered into their path. But Ziost long ago settled into an ice age, and it would remain a frigid, glacier-strewn world throughout the history of the Sith. The first Sith colonization of Ziost happened not long before the start of the Ice Age. After they were able to expel the Rakata from their world, the Sith, using the Rakatan starships they had taken for themselves, were able to reach for the stars and make their way to other worlds within the Stygian caldera. Now, desolate Korriban was left behind as a tomb world infested with religious fanatics, while Ziost became the new homeworld of the Sith. Ziost became the capital of the Kingdom of the Sith, and it would be the capital of the first Sith Empire, where Sith kings built a great citadel atop a perilous cliff. Not long after the Sith arrived, an ice age struck Ziost. The lush woodlands were destroyed, replaced instead by ice-bitten tundras, snow-capped mountains, and glaciers. The climate became arid and bitterly cold, and the abrupt changes took with them not just the lush vegetation, but also much of the civilization the Sith had established. But the Sith remained on the planet, and they quickly rebuilt. Ziost would remain the homeworld of most Sith and the throne world of their greatest kings for the next 20,000 years. In 6,900 BBY, Dark Jedi came to Korriban, changing the trajectory of the Sith forever. After landing on the Sith's ancient homeworld, they relocated to Ziost, where they integrated into Sith society and established themselves as the Dark Lords of the Sith. Ziost became the capital of their new Sith Empire, and much like the ancient Sith had done long before them, they erected palaces in their names on the planet's surface, even rebuilding the Sith Citadel, now the Citadel of Ajunta Pal. The leadership of the new Sith Empire was given to Ajunta Pal, and under him, the Sith Council. Over time, Sin's ambitions led her to seeking out more lost Sith knowledge. It was on Ziost that she eventually wrote the Sith Code, which was embraced as a unifying mantra by the Sith. With time, many rivalries developed between the various Sith Lords. Ziost, however, remained a neutral world, a place where Sith could congregate and discuss matters of empire and politics without fearing conflict. Unfortunately for the Sith, however, that peace didn't last forever. In 5000 BBY, Marka Ragnos, the Dark Lord of the Sith, died. With him gone, the Sith Empire hovered upon the precipice of change. Two political camps had formed, each supporting a different approach to the future. One side, led by Ludo Kresh, was more conservative, believing in continuing to do things as they had been done. Going beyond the Stygian caldera would leave the Empire exposed to external assailants, Kresh argued. The other side, led by Naga Sadow, believed in expanding the Sith Empire beyond the reaches of the nebula. Both Sith were vying for the title of Dark Lord of the Sith, and the moment Marka Ragnos' tomb had been sealed, they began to duel to the death. Before either could prevail, however, Marka Ragnos' ghost appeared to warn them. The end of their golden age was fast approaching, and they had to be smart or die out. Soon after, the Daragon twins arrived. A council meeting was held to decide on their fate. Sadow supported using them to navigate back to the Republic so they could launch an invasion, while Kresh argued for their execution. In the end, the council sided with Ludo Kresh and decreed they were to be executed. Sadow, however, had other plans. Rather than letting the useful humans go to waste, Sadow orchestrated a plot. He had loyal followers steal Republic blasters from the twins' ships, then sent a strike team to assault Ziost with a small strike force. His goal was to make his fellow council members believe it was already too late and their existence had been discovered by the Republic. While that was happening, Sadow liberated the Daragons from prison himself, killing all witnesses. He left another Republic blaster behind to frame the Republic for the prison break. After hiding away the Daragons in his personal fortress, he returned to Ziost and pretended to be outraged at the assault. The Sith Council, now incensed by the attack, supported Sadow's ambitions of taking revenge upon the Republic, much to Ludo Kresh's horror. This all led to the Great Hyperspace War, which of course ended in disaster for the Sith. When the Republican Jedi made their way to the Sith Caldera, they plundered many of Ziost's Sith treasures, documents, and other artifacts. Ziost was abandoned once more, left in ruins. The only Sith to truly survive the war eventually made their way to Dromund Kaas, as we mentioned earlier, which now took Ziost's place as capital of the Empire. In the years between the Great Hyperspace War and the emergence of the true Sith, Ziost had many occupiers grace its surface. During the Mandalorian Wars, the Neo-Crusaders conquered it for themselves, and Darth Revan took it back in the later days of the Jedi Civil War. After Revan was defeated, the true Sith eventually reclaimed the barren world, beginning to rebuild it in secret. Ziost was transformed once more into a bustling center of Sith activity, used now as the capital of Imperial buffer space. Although much of it remained covered in tundra, several industrial sectors popped up. The Orbital Defense Command Center, which was headquarters of the Ministry of Logistics, was also founded on Ziost. New Adasta soon became the planet's capital, a bustling trade hub that soon gave Ziost the nickname of Gateway to the Empire. When the true Sith emerged from hiding and began the Great Galactic War, Ziost wasn't spared as Dromund Kaas was. After the victories at Ord Radama, the Republic made for Korriban. Darth Malgus, however, believed this to be a ploy from the Republic. Indeed, the small strike teams had been a distraction. The bulk of the Republic's forces had amassed in secret, only to gather above Ziost and lay siege to the planet. The gateway to the Empire would have been a fantastic foothold for the Republic to be able to probe deeper into Imperial space. However, after several months, the Republic's siege was broken and Ziost remained part of the Sith Empire. Now, if you recall, we talked earlier about a Jedi strike team that was able to infiltrate Dromund Kaas and allegedly kill the Sith Emperor. For several years, the true Sith Empire continued to function perfectly well, led by the Dark Council, who honestly believed they were better off without an Emperor that barely bothered to rule. Unfortunately for the Sith, however, and the galaxy at large, the Emperor wasn't truly dead. Through the efforts of the Revanites on Yavin 4, his spirit was resurrected and it thirsted for blood and life. To regain his former strength, Vitiate turned to Ziost. First, he possessed the minds of several people, both Jedi and Imperials, using them to prepare a ritual. When this ritual was finally unleashed, Vitiate drained the life of all living things on the planet, much like he had done on Nathema centuries ago. Some citizens were able to be evacuated, but the vast majority were instantly killed, leaving only a few colossal monoliths behind. Much of the infrastructure was leveled in the process, leaving Ziost a frozen wasteland once more. For thousands of years, Ziost was never repopulated. In the beginning, people occasionally traveled to it in order to study the effect of the ritual of the Sith monstrosities left behind, but over time, it was forgotten and the location was lost. That is, at least, until the new Sith Wars, when the Brotherhood of Darkness tried to reclaim many of these ancient Sith worlds. It was briefly reclaimed around 1004 by the Brotherhood, but its memory was once again lost, and it would never again regain its former glory. The last planet we'll be looking at in depth today is Car Delba, one of the 5 sacred worlds of the Sith connected by that looping hyperlane we keep mentioning. Located at the very edge of Sith space, Car Delba was also at the very end of the Kamat Aegeat hyperlane, which led all the way to Begarin in the middle of Sith space. When looking at it from space, Car Delba was such a wasteland that it looked like an asteroid, the surface jutting with mountains and craters. It was covered in sleet and snow year-round, much like its only moon, Kashyyyk. The only creatures of note that were able to evolve on this hellhole were the fearsome Sith war behemoths, once a peaceful herding animal corrupted into a monstrosity by Sith alchemy, and the Sith warbirds, a species of large, flightless bird that lived in the mountains. Much like other planets in Sith space, Car Delba was first discovered by the ancient Sith species following the invasion of Korriban in 27,700 BBY. Thanks to the use of the Rakatan starships, they were able to spread throughout the remainder of the caldera, claiming worlds for the ancient Sith Empire. Much later, it would become part of the Sith Empire, led by Sorza Sin and the other Dark Jedi. By the time of the Great Hyperspace War, Car Delba had been claimed by Naga Sadow, who established his fortress on the planet. Except, in truth, the fortress on Car Delba was only a decoy. His true headquarters were on the planet's moon, Kashyyyk, which is where he took the Daragons after orchestrating their prison break. After he convinced the Sith Council on Ziost to support his bid for Dark Lord of the Sith, he separated the siblings, leaving one on Car Delba and the other on Kashyyyk. Sadow's rival, Ludo Kresh, didn't take this defeat sitting down. He wasted little time in gathering his allies, forming a fleet with other Sith Lords, and attacking Sadow's fortress on Car Delba. The fortress was badly damaged, but it had been little more than a decoy. With Kresh's forces distracted, bombarding the planet's surface, Sadow's true fleet emerged from the moon of Kashyyyk, attacking Kresh's fleets from behind and decimating them. Kresh was forced to flee, narrowly escaping death himself. With Kresh dealt with, Sadow allowed one Daragon to escape, using her ship as a tracking beacon back to Republic space. Then Sadao waited, repairing his Kar Delba fortress and beginning to build his invasion force. It took months of preparation, but when they were ready to launch their invasion, Ludo Kresh reappeared, denouncing Sadao and his plan. Sadao proceeded to kill him through deception and finally launched the great hyperspace war of his dreams. After he and the Sith Empire got their butts handed to them, Sith space was mostly abandoned. Much like Ziost had been, Kar Delba was claimed by the Mandalorian Neo-Crusaders in the Mandalorian Wars, then by Darth Revan in the Jedi Civil War. Centuries later, it seems as if Kar Delba was part of the reconstituted Sith Empire, used as little more than a rendezvous point for fleets in Sith space. In the time of the new Sith Wars, the Brotherhood of Darkness eventually controlled the region around Kar Delba, but it never again saw use. In its entire history since the time of the ancient Sith, Kar Delba had only ever truly been populated by Naga Sadao and his followers during the time before the Great Hyperspace War, making it one of the least important worlds in Sith space. This was likely influenced due to its position at the very edge of the caldera, as well as its truly inhospitable environment. Finally, for the sake of being thorough, we'll take a look at the last two planets in the loop of sacred worlds, Relg and Creyas II. Relg was fairly uninspiring as a world. Unlike Ziost and Kar Delba, it was actually an agri-world, surface covered in fertile, arable soil that supplied the Sith Empires with much needed food. That said, the world itself was primitive, used exclusively for the cultivation of food. The only inhabitants were Ludo Kresh himself, who had taken the world as his throne world, much like Sadao had taken Kar Delba. In the years preceding the Great Hyperspace War, Kresh built a palace on the planet where he resided when not dealing with Sith business. The final sacred planet of the Sith, Creyas II, was also unremarkable. It had 2 moons, one of which was very low orbiting. At night, the light reflected barely illuminated the planet's dim surface. Sometime before 14,000 BBY, ancient Sith colonized Creyas II, as they had with other worlds in the caldera. The Sith purebloods built a Sith library temple on the world where they could study Sith alchemy. The temple was abandoned around 14,000 BBY, however, though the spirits of the Sith remained behind, belligerently haunting its grounds. Over the next 10,000 years, the temple was slowly buried by time, with only its tallest obelisk still standing above the surface. Over the millennia, many Jedi had visited the library temple ruins, drawn by the promise of forbidden knowledge. However, the Sith spirits we just mentioned didn't take kindly to the Jedi intruders, trapping their spirits forever. In 4000 BBY, Varanim, a Jedi Knight, also made her way to Creyas II, looking for the dark side knowledge rumored to have been left behind on the world. The knight recited an ancient incantation that prompted the temple to rise up from underground. She'd hoped to convince the Sith spirits to let her study, but much like the Jedi that had come before, they deemed her unworthy and killed her, trapping her spirit along with the others to be tormented for eternity. Creyas II was mostly left alone after that. It was briefly surveyed by the reconstituted Sith Empire, but left undisturbed, and later Jedi would document its existence. But the planet had developed a reputation, and few dared disturb the Sith spirits, fearing for their souls. Those that did never lived to tell the tale. If you've made it this far, we're sure you've noticed the pattern. All the planets we focused on today played different roles in the Sith Empires, but at the end of the day, they all shared pretty much the same fate. Unlike the Jedi worlds, which were mostly in continuous use until something happened to make them uninhabitable, the many Sith worlds went through cycles of being colonized and built up, destroyed, abandoned, and lost to time until their rediscovery. This was true not just for the planets we looked at today, but also for those we didn't get into due to how much less info there is on them in general. This cyclic pattern of colonization, destruction, and abandonment can only really be attributed to the ephemeral nature of the Sith empires that sprung up over time. Unlike the Jedi Order, which faced extinction several times but was never truly wiped out, the galaxy knew vast swaths of time without the presence of a Sith Empire. When the Sith weren't actively growing their influence, the planets they had left behind were forgotten by the rest of the galaxy as well, tucked away in an inhospitable, difficult to access pocket of space, whereas the Jedi worlds were far more central in the galaxy. The Sith worlds were only ever reclaimed by the Sith themselves whenever they researched ancient Sith history and learned of their once Throneworlds, and the cycle would begin anew. Even as early as the time of the new Sith Wars, the time of most of these worlds had passed. The Sith who came after, whether it was the Brotherhood, or Bane, or Sidious himself, never really stood a chance of reclaiming their glory. They returned to these worlds for clout, for lack of a better term, hoping to find something of the ancient Sith that had inspired such fear in the galaxy. But clinging to the past rarely makes the future better, as all the Sith found, and soon they too would just be yet another stain on the galaxy's history. That was our take on some of the most important Sith worlds of old. There are many other worlds with significantly less information available surrounding them. Would you be interested in another video rounding out this series? If you could visit any of these planets in their golden age, which would you have liked to see? Let us know your thoughts and more in the comment section below. And as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.